I'm also now happy to welcome Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Good to see you there from Jerusalem, and congratulations on your 71st birthday. We're so happy that you would like to spend that birthday with us.
Well, who's counting these days? But thank you. Thank you very much. Boy, it's a pleasure to be with you and my friends, President Duque and President Kagame and all of you. As my staff is moving around here, I'm actually in my office here, the Prime Minister's residence. I stopped a coronavirus cabinet, which we're dealing with some of these questions that I'll address, that you asked me to address. And so I regret that I'll have to go back there because we're in the midst of these discussions on how to stem the tide. We have brought down Israel is in a very high position of infections. We are now, I think, probably the lowest in Europe, but we were the highest a few weeks ago, and we had to take a decision that was very tough on a general lockdown. And we did it. It's a very hard political decision to make, and it brought the numbers rapidly down. But the question now is, of course, well, they'll climb back up because the virus is the virus is the virus. So one of the things we're considering involves education. What do we do with the schools? And how do we open them up? And the reason that's an acute question is not merely because of the virus, but also because of the digital divide. Because if you don't want to open them up and you use e-learning, what about those who don't have e-learning? And for example, that's prevalent in the Orthodox community or in the Arab citizens of Israel. And so one of the things that we've decided to do just now, 5 minutes ago, is to allocate money to buy computers for these kids so that so we can cross, first of all, the digital divide inside the country itself, to give everyone the opportunity. And that's the first thing I'd like to address, since these are the questions that were forwarded to me. How do we at least reduce the digital divide? One is infrastructure. It's computers, it's fibers, fast fiber that goes to some of these more remote places in our country. Even though we have a tiny country, we have central places where the 5G companies will go, and other remote areas where they won't go because it's not profitable for them. So we are making sure, we're actually, in order not to be held back, we told them, okay, we are reducing the universal requirements of spreading fiber to everywhere, spread it to where it's profitable, which is most of the country. But those that are not there, what we're going to do is create a special fund so we can reach fiber. We can have fiber reach everyone. Fiber, computers, number one. It's simple. I mean, it sounds simple. It's not, obviously, but it is actually conceptually simple. You have to make sure that the physical wherewithal of the modern, the digital world reaches everyone. The second thing, and that enables us e-learning, both in Corona and in the future. That's going to be, it's clearly where it's going. My son is a university student, and he just told me that he finished his first day in e-learning, and they've been doing e-learning for the last 6 months. And he says, I'm not sure I should say this, but he says, Daddy, it's better. It's better in one sense because, because they can get very, very good teachers. So I think that's the way to go. You have to get the material, the physical infrastructure out there so everybody, every girl and boy, every teenager and every university student can have these capabilities. So we have that. The second thing is we have a deliberate program to increase our technological cadres. Okay, that means that, for example, the number of IT first degree students in our universities has increased by 70% in a few years. That's a deliberate strategy that we're doing, because you'd say, well, wait a minute, but you're creating a digital divide because these guys are at the top, and what about those who are at the bottom? But they're pulling everyone else, and also they're providing, you're educating also educators. And so we are increasing, we're constantly increasing the number of skilled, high-tech workers per capita. We're still the highest in the world, actually by far. The number of R&D that we spend per person is the highest in the world. And we're continuing that because we don't see that as creating a digital divide. We see that as creating a digital world for all our people and our economy. So we're definitely, second point after infrastructure is basically technological education. And that starts below, it starts at the bottom, but you really have to make sure that you have that at the top. Don't forget the top. There's e-learning at the top, e-learning at the bottom, but there's got to be high skill, very high skill at the top. Don't lose out. Don't try to erase the divide by lowering the top. You can raise the bottom, but don't lower the top. If you lower the top, you'll get nothing. So don't do that. That's the second thing that we're doing. The third thing that we're doing, which I think is important, is to reduce and adopt regulation. You know, our economies and our educational systems, our social systems are geared to yesterday, and they're not even geared to the present. And we have to gear them towards tomorrow. So you have to deregulate. Regulation is a very, very big thing. I heard Paul Kagame speak, for example, about drones. That's a perfect example. Right now, we've got drone delivery in the country. We're doing a pilot on this. We have driverless cars pilot, and we're going to change regulations to fit that. So that's the third area, and that applies to many, many areas. Three things then: physical infrastructure for the digital age, preparation of personnel, basically human resources, and third, deregulation. I would say these are the three things that I can point to. The fourth is, I would say, international cooperation. We've been cooperating with Africa, Latin America, Australia, Singapore, Britain, Australia. These cooperations are very valuable. I can tell you that there is a new cooperation, and one that is giving enormous hope to everyone here, and that's with the Arab world. We have just signed peace agreements with the United Arab Emirates. We're signing peace agreements now with Bahrain. The first delegation, a formal delegation of ministers from the UAE visited Israel yesterday, along with the American Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Mnuchin, and we signed agreements that are going to also share technology, technology also in Corona and everything else. This is a very, very important thing. And I can tell you, I discussed with these ministers, how about Israeli UAE cooperation in third countries? For example, in Africa, or for that matter, in Latin America. Why not? I think this is the fourth element that I bring forward, and I think the task is enormous. Corona is an enormous challenge, but we'll get behind it eventually. Not eventually. I think soon we'll have vaccines. They'll be applied. We'll have to live with that for probably a very long time. But I think the world has already changed. The only question is, how fast do we change to this changing world? And I believe, knowing the people, knowing you, and the good effort that the World Economic Forum is putting forward, I think this is a challenge to which we're all up to. Of course, there is one other element, a fifth element that I mentioned, that I think Israel excels in, and that's cyber defense. I say cyber defense because the more we move into the digital world, the more we put out this infrastructure, the more we have e-learning, the more we have a dependence on these systems, the more we need to protect them. And I think that in this regard, Israel has forged important breakthroughs, and we share them also with our friends. So these are the things that I think we can bring forward. And again, I wish I could stay more with you, but I have to go back to dealing with Corona. So thank you, and it's good to see you all.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. If I may, just a short follow-up question before you go back to your cabinet. You know what the three head of states and governments here have in common, President Duque, President Kagame, and you, Prime Minister, is that in both these three countries, we have established the Fourth Industrial Revolution Center of the World Economic Forum. So you are already connected with the network, and since you mentioned also the UAE, that's the fourth country where we have now established the center in Dubai for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So we already have a great ecosystem. Thank you for updating us also on the COVID situation. As you know, we're also in the second spike here in Europe, so you're not alone in Israel. But I think what I've seen also from all the participants, the CEOs being part of this conversation is, of course, that they acknowledge that Israel is one of the most innovative countries in the world. But how will you, Mr. Prime Minister, secure that you stay that way so there is no complacency? How will you also in the years to come be cutting edge? Is there part of that success you can tell the rest of us?
Invest, invest, invest. Just invest. Invest a lot. Invest in R&D. Invest in at the bottom and invest at the top. We have an investment at the top that is a sunk cost because of our military expenditures. They're increasingly knowledge-based, but we don't, and we therefore necessity forces us to constantly invest in information systems and cyber defense and so on. But I would say that our big challenge now is to invest in the bottom, to make sure that we lift the bottom. The top will keep rising. I mean, that's just a fact. The top will rise, invest in the bottom. And look, I want to wish you much success. I welcome this cooperation with the World Economic Forum and the opportunity to see my friends at a distance. But I do hope and believe and pray that we'll get beyond this epidemic quickly. Maybe it shows us how we're all connected in ways that we may not have wanted, but we now realize is there. We'll have to cooperate to secure our common future. I want to thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing there is a lot of activity in the background there now, so your staff wants you back. And you're right, Mr. Prime Minister, that COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere.